Lamborghini Temerario debuted last year, and I haven't seen one overwhelmingly positive statement about it since. People are hating on it like it's the cool thing to do. I, for one, actually like it, and I don't know why people are so shocked that it doesn't have the V10 anymore. I thought this was a known thing for years now. It dropped 2 cylinders, looks and sounds different than the Huracan, so Lamborghini fanboys had an aneurysm.
We heard about you before you even got up here, cause you're not that cute. You look dusty.
Hi guys, I'm Shmi and you're watching Vinstagram.
One of my first big videos on the internet was me talking trash about the Lamborghini Huracan. On TikTok I did this often and people thought I was rage baiting, and of course people said I was broke and that I've never been in one, even though the reason I made the video was not because I drove one, but I drove 3 and I was extremely underwhelmed. But it's been entirely too long since I've hated on the Huracan, and in 2025 there's just not enough Huracan hate in circulation on the internet. And I'd say I'd hate to be that guy, but I don't hate to be that guy. Actually, I love being that guy. I thrive as that guy. I think part of it came from me liking the aesthetics of the Gallardo so much and not preferring the more bulbous, rounded, and slightly curvaceous nature of the Huracan. And then as I started to get some seat time in Huracans, I realized that it was almost the exact opposite of how I expected a Lamborghini to be. People always made out Lamborghinis to be these harsh, dramatic, loud, visceral machines that weren't easy to drive, but they felt like an event. Not like you're going to an event, but that they are the event every time you drive. Then I drove like 3 different Huracans. 2 of them were twin turbo, but it only took one for me to realize that it wasn't what I expected Lamborghini to be like. Then I drove a Urus, and that felt even more like an Audi than the Huracan did, so my perception of the modern Lamborghini brand isn't exactly the best, especially when I've never had such an underwhelming experience in a McLaren, Porsche, or Ferrari. But the new Temerario is out, the Huracan is finally no more, and while I no longer expect the baby Lambo to be some sort of race car for the road, or at least not offer 911 GT3 levels of engagement and excitement, I feel like a lot of the Temerario hate is coming from how it looks and how it sounds. And if I'm being real, y'all are tripping. Hear me out for a sec. Stay tuned because I'm going to touch on the sound in a minute, but I first want to discuss how criminally underrated the aesthetics of this car are. I need y'all Huracan meat riders to bear with me for a second and just understand that no, this is not a Huracan. They didn't try to make an evolution of a Huracan, and this will never be a Huracan. The quicker y'all come to terms with that, the quicker you'll learn to like the Temerario, which I think people will eventually come around to this car. Personally, I think that's a good thing that it'll never be a Huracan, because the way y'all hate the Temerario is the way I hated the Huracan when it first came out. It was a pretty big step away from the Gallardo's long straight lines and acute angles into something a little softer, a little more rounded off, and a little more, my fault, a lot more obsessed with hexagons. I was hoping the Temerario strayed a little further from the Huracan's hexagon addiction, but I guess that was too unrealistic of an expectation. But what I do appreciate is how well this design creates such a cool modern adaptation of older Lamborghini design cues. The Lamborghini Yalpa, the original mid-engine V8 Lambo, had similar looking buttresses, and like the Gallardo, you get this flat rear deck that peers down into the engine bay. That was one of the main things I missed from that generation of Lambo. Luckily, a lot of people spec the glass engine bay cover on those cars so you could still see the engine, but if you remember, the base engine cover option on the Huracan were those black plastic louvers that I don't really recall anyone preferring. I'm glad they brought the flat deck lid back in the Temerario and the Revuelto. You can't quite see the engine as much in the Temerario, but I appreciate the gesture. The proportions of the rear are also just so much more similar to the Gallardo, with the small tail lights placed higher up on the bumper, followed by the vents above the wheel arch, which was also a design cue from the Gallardo. And as we make our way around the sides, you also get that big side vent that we got on the Gallardo, similarly placed on the Temerario. That whole door just screams modern Gallardo. Alright guys, the drinking game starts now. Take a sip every time I say Gallardo. Good luck. That's not to say the design is all good though. Nobody's perfect, and I think my main point of criticism for the rear of this car, outside of not having the Y-shaped tail lights, is this rear section of window. I wish they would have just finished that out to a point like they did with the Gallardo as well. Up front, I do think the proportions mimic the Huracan a little more, but what you also get with that are these veins on the hood like with the Gallardo. And I don't think as many people peep this, but the long, slender headlights kind of sort of resemble the first gen Gallardo headlights, but if they were turned to the side. And I think that's a good thing. This is common with a lot of headlights that included xenon or halogen bulbs, but I feel like the headlights are part of what really dated the pre-LP Gallardo. And the industry was just headed away from designs like that. Ferrari ended up making their headlights smaller as well, and the headlights on the Huracan might be my favorite thing about it. Certainly an upgrade from the Gallardo. I won't lie, I also really enjoyed how the front bumper on the Performante looked, and I'm not mad that it took inspiration from that either. But you can also kind of see how it took inspiration from the final edition Gallardos, or what more of y'all might remember, the Squadra Corsa and the STS, or Super Trofeo Stradale, which is sort of what I feel like the Huracan Performante's front bumper was inspired by anyways. It's crazy because there were a lot of people that didn't like the final edition Gallardos. Without the rest of the extreme era of the Gallardo STS and the Squadra Corsa, it doesn't look as good. But I'm glad they brought back a wider, more aggressive looking middle section of the front bumper for better airflow. Finally, Really, the wheels they released it on remind me of these wheels from the LP Gallardos. Lamborghini barely comes out with a bad wheel, but honestly, these two are some of my favorites. I genuinely do not understand how people think this is a bad looking car. If you like older Lambos, look at it in an older style spec. Depending on the type of alcohol you're playing the drinking game with, if you squint, that's literally a Gallardo. That being said, they debuted it in the wrong spec. I already thought it looked good, so they didn't need a nice spec to convince me. Like, nobody needs a spectacular list of options for a LaFerrari or a P1 to look good. Looking good is certainly a spectrum, but I think these cars are really gonna thrive and people are really gonna start changing their minds about this car once they start seeing them on the streets in older, vibrant colors like the yellows, oranges, greens, even silvers, stuff like that. If they're gonna give it so many nostalgic design cues from older Lamborghinis, you really gotta bring it out in a spec that's reminiscent of the time period to really drive it home. A matte grayish blue was really not the color to bring this car out in, and a deep metallic green with red Christmas edition pinstriping was not the spec to bring out the more extreme edition out in. So now we can finally get on to the elephant in the room, the sound. Look, I agree, that is not a good sounding exhaust. I'm not about to get on here and lick the bottom of Lamborghini's boot clean and act like that sounded even remotely good. Even in the reviews that have come out, it sounded like they're getting a lot of artificial sound coming into the speakers, and that just isn't a good look so far. Honestly, I think it was their fault trying to show off the exhaust at the Quail, because I know they had to start it up at the factory. If they knew it was gonna sound like that, they should have just rolled it off the stand in EV mode. That way, when the journalists got their hands on it for reviews, that would have at least been people's first impressions of the exhaust, and it certainly sounded better in their videos. First impressions are everything, and Lamborghini definitely did it wrong. Because the exhaust might have sounded bad on the stand, but I think it's kind of dumb to take that at face value, because newsflash, every car sounds bad in 2025. Think of some of the best sounding exotic cars out right now. You're probably thinking Ferrari 12 Cilindri, the GT3 RS, but really besides the 750S, all those cars sound like garbage from factory. They're all plagued with huge mufflers, particulate filters, and soft rev limiters. All the clips y'all hear of a GT3 RS sounding good are usually equipped with an aftermarket exhaust from like R1 Motorsport, Gentani, Soul, GMG. Revueltos don't even howl like that unless they go through Gentani or Novatec, and Novatec pretty much has a monopoly on good sounding 12 Cilindri clips. So combined with the fact that they revved it with the valves closed and that they have all this legally required exhaust restriction and the soft limiter, it's not gonna sound that great. Run the clip back, you can hear the car start up, then the valves close, and then it doesn't rev past like 4,000 RPM. I don't even think it's fair to judge any modern vehicle on the stock exhaust note because of stuff like this. Because I don't think Lamborghini execs were in the boardroom going, yo, we're known for loud, obnoxious exhaust notes. Let's make it quieter on purpose. Customers are gonna love that. Right now, I think we should just hold our judgments until we see videos from Gentani, from Novatec, from Valvetronic. And hey, Secret Weapon Fabrication usually has the best sounding supercar exhaust. But until that F1 exhaust for the R8 and Huracan, they weren't really known for being the first to the punch on anything. But I'm hoping that we'll hear something from them in short order as well. That's when we'll finally hear the true potential of the Lamborghini Temerario exhaust note. But to say that a 10,000 RPM flat plane V8 from Lamborghini of all companies is gonna sound bad is insane.